Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Dojo Live. Today is Tuesday, April 12th, 2022. This is Tulio Sirgusa broadcasting from Southern California. Joining me today is Kim Lantis in Hermosillo, Mexico.
Hi. Wow. Did I tell you or did I not tell you that we're going to be interrupted? And without fail, right at the introduction, here's Zoe.
We'll try to minimize them as best we can. That's why they invented the mute button. Anyway, we have Giora Engel, who's the co-founder and CEO at Neosec, who's joining us from Palo Alto. Welcome, Giora. Good to have you.
Thank you.
And we're going to talk about an interesting conversation today about APIs and security and risks. But before we go into that topic, let's get to know our guest a little bit. So, Giora, if you could please introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll dig in and see what Neosec's all about. But let's get to know you a little bit. And again, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. So maybe a little bit of introduction about myself. I started, more in the cyber warfare field. Kind of coming from Israel. Maybe it's obvious these days. I don't know. It feels like everybody comes from the same background in security. Neosec is my second time starting a cybersecurity company. I did the whole journey before with LightCyber. LightCyber was the company that invented the concept of XDR, what's known today as XDR, and then became part of Palo Alto Networks, and now a couple of years ago started a new company called Neosec in the API security space. That's kind of my background in a nutshell.
Very nice. Giora, tell us about Neosec. What was like that aha moment that made you and your co-founder decide we need to go do this? And what is it that you guys do today?
So I've been in enterprise security for a while, almost for maybe 9 years before Neosec. And I realized that while enterprise security is important, these days everything that is being built, getting built today is application environments and APIs because of the way that we do business today. I mean, everything is virtual, everything is externally facing. So people don't really build data centers anymore and don't have internal networks to protect. Instead, they build applications and expose APIs. And it looks like all the controls that we built for the enterprise network are not relevant for these new environments. So that was kind of my understanding that something needs to be built for this new realm. There's actually one specific meeting that I had with a customer back in the day. It was actually quite some time ago, about 5 years ago. It was a very modern company, and I realized that they don't have a data center, they don't have any real infrastructure internally, but they deliver that service that millions of users use. So I mean that kind of told me that the future is probably something different than what we were doing back then, and that was maybe the first seed that I was in my mind.
All right, so we have the modern enterprise that has been somewhat left behind by solutions that were not built for the modern enterprise. So let's see what we can learn today, and what is the risk, what are the risks, and how we can manage them. Kim, if you could introduce the topic and see what the question is that we're going to answer. I'm looking forward to seeing what we can learn.
Sure. Thank you for joining us today, Giora, Julio, as always. The topic is chosen by our guest is APIs and the future of cybersecurity. I think you already I'm not sure why this is the future very nicely in your introduction of SEC. But the question we're trying to answer is, are your APIs putting your business at risk? Now, when I popped into your website, I did notice this that struck me as quite creative and also made me curious. And that was something that you refer to as an API blind spot. Now, I know blind spots when I'm driving my car, right? Where you're taught if you need to change lanes, you can't just trust the mirror, you got to look over your shoulder. What is an API blind spot exactly?
So it's interesting because when we develop new services, new products, new applications, we have to expose a lot of data to the outside, and that happens today by design. It's no longer a case where we build some internal, very gated system and place it in a data center, and only a few people can access it. Instead, we're actually designing these applications to be exposed to the outside. Now, we take care of a lot of different security aspects of these applications, like cloud security and other security controls. But the actual API or application that is exposed to the outside is just exposed, and nobody's actually looking how it's used. What happens if the client that is using it is compromised, or if it's not using it correctly. This is typically where the new types of cyber breaches happen today. So that's kind of the blind spot. It's maybe an obvious blind spot, but it's actually a blind spot that almost every organization has today.
All right, and that's exactly where Neosec comes in then?
Yeah, the first problem that we typically help solve is API, what's called today API discovery. It turns out that a lot of organizations expose their applications and APIs. I mean, it can be part of their web application or part of as kind of a service-to-service communication that fuels the product or delivers part of their product ecosystem. And the first step is really discovering all of your APIs, getting an inventory of everything that you're exposing to the outside. Then, of course, we do also detection and response and help with other steps of the journey.
So, Giora, if you could just maybe let's unpack this a little bit from where we've come from where we are now. So, you mentioned many of the cybersecurity or security products that were created were predominantly created for the enterprise, like on-prem type of applications. So let's call it a closed garden. You also had software that had a lot more feature functionality within that closed garden that didn't need to interface with other platforms. Today, it's different, right? We have a lot of interdependent applications so it's more of an ecosystem that are necessary for many enterprises to run their business. So it's not just a one-stop software solution. You've got to be able to interface with a number of different providers. So it's an open garden. So what's the difference in terms of how you handle security in the closed garden versus the open garden? I mean, the answer might be obvious, but I'm curious to get it from your perspective.
Yeah, no, I think you're 100% accurate in your description. I think it might be obvious, but it's a struggle that a lot of companies are going through today, because the change is really in the business needs. It starts with the fact that your business needs require you to expose your core business, the most sensitive data, to the outside. It's almost like an oxymoron. I mean, it's completely different than the way that it used to be done before, but it's really a business need. So there is no question about it. It has to be delivered that way. And therefore, the security paradigms need to shift a lot, because it's no longer just protecting the infrastructure against intruders or against access that is not granted, but it's really that granted access that is the riskiest, because you're opening your for example, if you're a financial institution, you're letting all of your it could be millions of customers access their bank account, perform money movement transactions, and you integrate with also some B2B partners that enable fintech applications to access that information. So all that, the most sensitive information and the ability to move money is exposed to the outside. So it's no longer enough to just protect the infrastructure. You need to understand what is going on your platform and make sure that even those authorized operations are really accounted for and done right. Because otherwise, of course, you can lose PII, you can lose money. I think the loss is very, very tangible in that sense.
So if we could just paint that a little, explode that a little bit more. Let's just use an example. Think of a company that has an automated cash flow solution with their bank. And what I mean by that is one of the biggest problems for companies is managing cash flow as it relates to demand for inventory, to maintain the inventory, deliver inventory to their buyers. So there's some solutions out there that might automate this. In other words, I have the sales system that shows how many orders I have, and then I have my inventory, and I can identify the gaps. And through some AI solution, I can go to the bank and says, I'm going to need extra amount of credit line to fulfill these orders. And I've got the money coming in from it because it's all connected. How many APIs are we talking about there? I mean, there's a possibility for 3 or 4 different supply chain solutions cobbled together with APIs. and where are the risk factors there, and how do you manage them?
So maybe I'll start with the known the better known quantity, which is the APIs that fuel the web application itself. So typically in such a platform, there is some kind of user access that enables the user to to see their account and perform some operations, and that web access is typically implemented through APIs today, meaning that there is some kind of client side application that is implemented as a web application, or even a mobile application, and the backend is implemented through APIs. So these APIs can really expose all the data and perform the transactions and operations. So this is maybe another way to think about it is the evolution of what used to be monolithic web applications into more modern microservice-based applications. But this is only one of the areas where APIs are used. The biggest, maybe fastest growing pool of APIs is actually these B2B APIs that enable service-to-service communication and integrating between different components in order to deliver a bigger service. So for example, in such a platform, if you have a way of another vendor integrating with that platform and adding more functionality, that is typically implemented through B2B APIs. Another good example for B2B APIs that we see every day, when we access our bank account, with our banking application, that typically involves web or mobile-based APIs. But when we access it through another application that maybe manages multiple accounts, or when we link between accounts, we have different bank accounts in different institutions. The way that we link between accounts, that's enabled through B2B APIs. That in the background can get the information and bring it from one place to the other on your behalf. So these B2B APIs are really the fastest growing, and I think today it's really obvious that within the next few years we're going to have 10x more types of of integrations and APIs compared to what we see today, because every new feature and every new product capability develops more and more of these APIs.
So where's the risk? Go ahead, Kim. I'll wait.
Sure. Well, I was just wondering, this makes me think about, the future of the cybersecurity. API is where it's headed. My question is about maybe the regulation, or who does the onus belong to? Whose responsibility is this? Is it me with my product? Is it the owners of all of the APIs and the other tools that I'm utilizing? And is it everyone? And at what point would we see, or are we seeing any type of regulation come in? Because it sounds sort of like everybody's, forgive my analogy, but it is what it is. COVID, let's wear masks. And if everybody were to wear their mask, maybe this is going to work. But inevitably, you've got people who just aren't into it. They can't, they don't know, whatever. So as you're talking about this tremendous numbers, is this going to get more regulated? What do you expect in that sense?
So maybe start with who should care about it, and then maybe I'll switch to some regulation that exists actually in the space. So I think the APIs are unidirectional in a sense. I mean, they can transfer data in both directions, but it's very clear who's the provider of an API and who's the client of the API. There's some kind of asymmetry in the model. So the provider of the API, which typically is a company that developed that particular service and exposed that particular service as part of their offering, is the one that really cares, should care and should protect their APIs, because it's linked to their core business. Versus the client that it can be related to a business process, but the client that has much less to lose than the provider of the API. So typically, I mean, if you're for example, in our example of a financial institution, the financial institution really should care and should protect their APIs. Now, as for regulation, we've seen some new regulation coming up. I mean, on one hand, there is more regulation that requires companies to expose APIs, in order to have more competition and more better service to the customer. For example, in healthcare, we see patient access regulations and interoperability that basically requires the healthcare insurance companies to expose all these sensitive information details through APIs, so that we can move from one provider to the other, and so on and so forth. So that there's another set of regulations with open banking that requires some financial institutions to open more and more access. But so this is kind of positive regulation that encourages companies to use APIs more. But there's also some regulation about protecting your APIs. For example, the FFIEC, which is part of the Federal Reserve. They have some regulation for certain types of financial institutions to treat APIs like an inventory of things that they need to protect. We see some new regulations also from FTC. So there it's definitely became like the new area of that you need to protect. And you can think about it like the next layer. I mean, if you protected the infrastructure, that's great, but now you need to protect the application level, which is one level up.
Yeah, this is why it's important for politicians to understand technology. Perfect.
Well, I mean, it's look, we often talk about this. The beautiful thing about technology is that it democratizes access. It gives people access to things that used to be either a closed garden or only for a set few. It's an equalizer. It makes it possible for everybody to get access to services and products and things that it's an equalizer, right? So the risk factors, as you mentioned, is all these things work with these interconnections, these APIs. So if one company isn't protecting themselves very well, it puts everybody else at risk. So now the entire ecosystem is at risk. So how do you solve that? I mean, does it, for your solution to be effective at Neosec, do all the participants of the ecosystem have to implement the solution, or is it just good enough if one does? Does it extend to all the other APIs? How does that come together?
Yeah. So I think, just like I mentioned before, the keys are really in the hands of the provider of the API. The company that authored the APIs and exposes their sensitive data. You don't need the others to participate in anything specifically. And I think, by definition, all these other parties, you don't control them. You might have some agreements with them. You provided them some access, but you don't really control their implementation. That's the whole purpose of APIs. You're opening your APIs so that different implementations can access your data.
Right.
And the way it works is by performing behavioral analytics. So I mentioned in the beginning that my background was inventing XDR, the concept of network and endpoint behavioral analytics, that is widely used today. But I think in APIs, the same concept is needed. You need to be able to see what is going on, and learn about normal user behavior. And by learning the normal behavior, you can spot different types of abnormalities that that should be flagged and maybe investigated or maybe even blocked. And that's kind of the key, because in the end of the day, it's not enough to just look for known patterns. The industry has a lot of different tools and technologies to look for different types of known patterns. Some of them are known as OWASP top 10. But beyond that, you need to be able to understand the behavior of authorized users, and traffic that looks legitimate, like technically it's authorized and it looks okay. It might be actually abuse of your APIs, because in the end of the day, your APIs expose all that sensitive information and enable you to perform different types of transactions. So you need to be able to monitor that behavior as well.
So I can't help but ask this question, and that is, are APIs not effective? Is there another next generation solution that we ought to be thinking about?
It's a good question. I don't think that there is not anything inherently good or bad about APIs. I mean, it's the way that I think about APIs is like thinking about it as the new network. What do I mean by that? Because network, we're used to packets and routers and switches.
Mm-hmm.
Today we don't really care about these devices anymore, because most of them are virtual. Actually, I mean, there are some physical devices, but we consume them through the cloud. So I mean, for us, it's it's all kind of virtual assets. So we don't really care about that layer anymore. It's kind of taken care of. as a developer. I mean, you know, when you use serverless and you use different types of cloud environments, you don't really need to actually build the physical infrastructure anymore. But the APIs are another layer on top of it that enables you interconnectivity between different services, both internally within your own application, and also externally to your partners and end users. So I think we need to think about APIs like the new network. Now, on top of that new network, you can implement whatever you want, and of course, you also need to monitor it and secure it.
That's interesting. I mean, I think it's fair to say that they've mostly functioned like the new middleware, right? I mean, that's kind of what APIs have functioned as, the new middleware. But I like your concept of the new network, which is a different approach to it. So how do we evolve there in terms of enhancing cybersecurity, tightening this up? I mean, I get Neosec has a solution, but ultimately every advancements in technology eventually has a cycle, right? Are we at the end cycle of APIs and looking at the next way of looking at it, i.e. the network? Or are we still in the middle? What are your thoughts? And I'm kind of asking to look at a crystal ball a little bit, but you being in the space, I'm curious to learn where it's heading.
So I think we're actually in the beginning of it, even though, I mean, I remember, I think when I started my career, it was around 99. I remember like web-based APIs were the new thing, and it's really the same thing as now. It's just that there were some different variants. I mean, we used to see in the past, we used to see things like SOAP and XML APIs, and now we see more RESTful APIs and kind of different variants. But the differences are so small that it doesn't even matter. So it's not a new invention. But the way that it's widely used today to deliver business applications is new, and I think it's related to the business transformation, the digital transformation that all these companies are going through, and their need to expose all that digital products to the outside. So I think it's just the beginning of in terms of what companies are going to expose and how they're going to do that. We just crossed the point where most of the attacks that we see today are related to APIs that are exposed. And I'm sure that we'll see more and more because data centers are new data centers are not built, and the future is in all these applications. And I think that the pace of development is really amazing because every company that you look at, even if it's a financial institution or a very modern tech company, they all develop more and more of these applications and APIs in a faster and faster pace. So I think what we're going to see in the next years is that a very, very big growth of these B2B APIs, and with that, the need to think about protecting the business as a core part of building these APIs.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense what you're saying. Like, it's not necessarily this brand new technology, but it makes me think of, I think I saw this meme once. It was talking about how it used to be that the very rich were the owners of cars and the poor people were the owners of horses. And today it's the opposite. Everyone owns a car and only the rich people own horses. And so it's like that shift of what had to change in order for cars to now be all over the road and you don't see watering holes and I don't know, whatever the posts are to tie up your horse and whatever. So is that's sort of what's happening here? It's like it's been around for a while, but now it's this mass adoption, and now it's like we need to create parking lots and whatever else and figure out how we're going to handle this.
Yeah, I think the use cases changed while the technology was already there, for a long time. So all of a sudden, we just need to expose a lot of things to to users and partners that need to be able to use it. So it cannot be obscure anymore. I mean, we used in the past when we exposed some things to the outside, it used to be some obscure protocols, some proprietary, things that only we know about, and maybe the other side needs a very specific reference or SDK to use. But with APIs, we can do it in a much simpler way. You document it in a standard way, like Open API, or also known as Swagger, and it enables the other side to just use your platform, regardless of how they're implemented and so on. So that simplicity is something that is a business need, and this is why it's stronger than any other IT trend, because it really comes from the business side. And when you have a business need, you have to deliver. And that's why I think we see the the fast adoption, and I think the more participants, in that ecosystem, the more like for example, I can represent the the fintech ecosystem. I'm as part of my participation in this area, I also lead the fraud prevention task force at the FTX, Financial Data Exchange. So we see that once financial institutions open the option to for aggregators and fintechs to connect to their platforms, we see thousands of fintech applications that provide all sorts of services that people need. So there's all of a sudden a way to get more data from your bank account information and more products and more capabilities.
Perfect. Talking about the business and the use cases, we're having a few minutes of our show today. I believe in your introduction, you mentioned that Neosec is your second adventure as a co-founder. And let's just talk a little bit about the company. What is it that makes maybe Neosec a little different than maybe your previous company? Or like are there shifts in culture or learnings from company A to Neosec? What has shifted?
So by the way, I didn't mention that, but Neosec is actually my third. The first one was not as big as LightCyber, but that's part of real life of a founder. Sometimes you sometimes you succeed and everybody knows about your company, and sometimes it doesn't grow the way you wanted it.
Sometimes you put it in the closet and forget about it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you fail and everybody knows about your company too.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, Neosec, is I think kind of doing it twice. Like the second time in cybersecurity, I learned so much in the process, both about building the company and building the team, and also about go to market and finding the right customer profile and how to find the right product market fit and so on. I think from a company perspective, I think what I'm really most proud of is our team and the way that that we empower the team, and the way that they can actually take that empowerment and do things that I never thought would be possible. I think in the end of the day, I think what's unique about Neosec is that we were born with the pandemic. I mean, we started the company just a couple weeks before the lockdown, and nobody knew that it's going to happen, right? And all of a sudden, we all had to shelter in place, and we just started to hire people. So it was very obvious for us that people won't always be able to be together, in the same office. We have a large R&D team in Israel, but today they can use the office more regularly. But in the beginning, every case, every lockdown, made it harder. So I think it really focused us on creating good processes and good communication, but also I think the most important thing is the sense of ownership. People need to know and to really own, what they're building. It doesn't matter if you're a junior developer or the most senior VP of engineering. I think your ownership needs to be very clear. You need to understand the mission in a clear way, and once that is done right, people can actually do above and beyond what you think they could do. So this is really what excites me the most. I mean, as a CEO and founder of the company, beyond the technology and all the cool things, I think it's really empowering people and seeing that people can do things, can go above and beyond, can get to the next level even from their own career perspective. That I think is the most exciting at the end of the day.
Congratulations.
That's great to hear, and that is actually the definition of a leader instead of a boss. So we appreciate that you're doing that, and I'm sure the people working there appreciate that as well. We need more of those types of CEOs who care about people's personal growth and success, not just the metrics. That's how you get engagement and people to stay committed and loyal. Is you actually.
And I think it's also the way that you get the high quality work in the end of the day. I mean, I think that it's important for people's growth and all of that, but it's also, I think, really important for the company.
Yeah.
In the end of the day.
There's a direct correlation. There's actually studies that show that we're highly engaged employees that are empowered, that have a sense of co-leadership and shared authority, those companies are in most cases 7x more profitable than the S&P 500. So it's not just good for people, it's good business ideas and good business sense. So we're glad to hear you guys are doing that. We're up on time. Unfortunately, we have a bunch of other questions. I would be curious to learn more about your experience as a co-founder, as an entrepreneur, everything you've learned through this journey. But maybe if you can squeeze that in a quick 30-second clip, what is it have you learned about yourself as an entrepreneur?
Oh, so many different things. I mean, it's I think that managing people is probably the most the most important thing, and I think having a clear vision and communication is really important, and doing it right from the beginning is also important, because whatever you start with is what you're going to have that forever in a sense. Even if you try to change it, whatever DNA you start with, in the company, it's only going to grow. And I think it's really important to do it right and to bring the right people, and to promote the right people and so on. So that I think is probably the most important. The other thing that is completely unrelated, maybe more technological, is that I think through through my previous journey and this journey, I came to realize the difference between building SaaS and between offering SaaS as an option. I think that's a big one. That's maybe a topic for a whole different discussion. But SaaS is really a whole culture. It's not like just a feature. It's not like a delivery method. Building a SaaS company is like a whole world, and it also means a lot for our customers.
Sounds like something we might be able to discuss in our design thinking show. Anyway, thanks for being with us, Giora. We appreciate you. Thanks for being with us again. Just stay with us as we go off the air in just a second. We got one more show tomorrow, right? Who do we got?
Yeah, here's Zoe making her presence. You'll probably hear her howl in just a second. But yes, we have one more show this week, and that will be Thursday afternoon with Elizabeth Bernstein, CEO of Neura Health. So don't miss it. I will be taking the show off that day, so you don't have to deal with my children.
Well, thanks for being with us again. See you back on Thursday at 12 p.m.
See you then. Bye.